Yo, 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 what's going on, dude? So I have not jerked off or watched porn since before COVID, and as ridiculous as that sounds, it's actually improved my life quite a bit. It's increased my energy, it's improved my mood, and it's just given me more life force to play around with. So I wanted to talk about the counterintuitive set of principles that have helped me achieve that. And these ideas are controversial, okay? This is simply what has worked for me and what I believe to be true. These principles took me years of blood, sweat, and tears to nail down, and I can guarantee you that if you can implement just a single one of these ideas consistently in your life, it's gonna save you a ton of time, energy, and frustration with NoFap or with any other difficult challenge that you're gonna be facing. Okay, so the first time I racked up a 30-day streak on NoFap, it was completely effortless. I was on a backpacking trip in bear country, and there were more grizzly bears than humans up there. In fact, there were no humans at all. It was all grizzlies except for us. And as a result of that, we had to travel in small groups at all times, and we were traveling through nature all day long. We'd be exposed to the elements. We would see the sun. We would experience the cold. And every day we had a mission to travel from point A to point B without getting eaten by bears. And I guarantee you that nobody jerked off the entire time. There was no time for it just doesn't cross your mind in that kind of environment. And I'm not saying you got to go live with bears, but there are some nugs of wisdom in that story that's going to help you level up to a place in your everyday life that's going to make NoFap a whole lot easier. Okay, so you might have heard about this study where researchers took mice and they put them in a small box and gave them access to cocaine. And the mice predictably took the cocaine until they died. And then researchers took a different set of mice, obviously, and put them in an environment that was more like their natural habitat. And those mice barely touched the drugs. And modern humans are like those mice. We're not living the way that we're built to live. As a result, that depresses our state. And from that lower level state, we're more tempted to reach for things outside of us like porn in order to bring ourselves up. And the key point here is that you are a machine that is finely tuned by millions of years of evolution to perform optimally under certain conditions. Socially, we evolved to be around other people because isolation meant death back in the day. Hermiting was not a thing. And today we're alone. We're isolated more than ever. Environmentally, back in the day, we would live in natural habitats. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we would essentially be in nature. And today we live in small, dark boxes. We don't get outside. We don't see the sun. We don't feel the cold. And nutritionally, we would have evolved for things that we could hunt or gather. And today, not only are we eating agricultural foods, but we're also eating just a whole bunch of junk food, sugars, etc., etc. And the difference between how we lived back in the day and how we live now is called evolutionary mismatch. And it's that gap that's the main reason that we're depressed, that we're sick, that we're overweight. So until you start closing that gap, you are going to be a leaky bucket. And you can't just fix this problem with brute force, right? You can't just put a hand over the hole in the bucket. Believe me, I've tried that, it does not work. What you want to do instead is get to the root of the problem and fix the bucket itself. And you can do that by living more the way that we're built to live, right? Socially, you want to get around people. Now, I know a big part of the reason you might be doing NoFap is to, develop your social life, to find a relationship, etc. And you want to do these things concurrently. You want to do them at the same time, because they really support one another. You want to show your brain that you're part of society. You want to show your brain that you're not alone in the woods somewhere, a hermit about to die, okay? Because when you are alone, that's the message that your brain is getting, and it's going to give you some very bad feelings of depression, of anxiety. So try to make friends if you can. I know it can be difficult, but whatever you do, get around people, join groups, be around other humans. Also fix the way you eat. You want to eat paleo. You want to eat in an ancestrally consistent manner. I know this is controversial, but it's exactly what you want to do. Because remember, you are a finely tuned machine, and you don't want to feed that machine any kind of fuel that it wasn't meant to burn. You also want to fix your sleep. This is out of scope for this video, but that's probably one of the best things you can do. One hint is that if you get bright light after 10 p.m., that's going to reduce your baseline level of happiness and motivation for days after that. And similarly, if you do not get bright light in the morning and throughout the day, that's going to impact your sleep and make it a lot harder for you to refill your bucket naturally, right? You're still going to have those holes leaking energy. Next, you see these plants behind me? This is no accident, right? You want to improve your habitat. You want to bring nature to you. The concept here is nature contact. Nature contact is beneficial for a whole lot of reasons. There's a lot of research behind this, but unfortunately, most of us don't have the luxury of living outside all day, right? Going for walks in the forest or whatever. So what are you going to do? Bring nature to you. Turns out there's a lot of studies that show that indoor plants have a lot of positive effects on your mood, on your productivity, on your focus. They even make you more sociable and many other benefits. In fact, I made a video about it, but it's a really important thing. Approximate your natural environment. And for the love of God, get outside as much as you can as well. And remember that story about backpacking that I told earlier? Well, the reason that NoFap was almost effortless is because we were living almost completely in sync with the way that we would have lived before, right? We were social. We were around people all day. We were traveling in natural environments. We had a mission, every day, move from point A to point B, the most primal mission there is. And of course, we weren't eating junk food and we weren't doing any of the other modern temptations. Okay, so if you want to level up to a place where no-fap becomes easier, the next evolutionary challenge to tackle are the big 6. Okay, so when I was in high school, I was a mess. I was tired. I had brain fog. I couldn't focus. I remember being in chemistry class right before lunch. Worst class for me. I hated it. I just felt terrible. But one day I had a revelation because I had a Red Bull energy drink for the first time in my life. I was 16 years old and I felt like myself for the first time in a very, very long time. And that night, well, I couldn't sleep. And the next day I felt even worse than I normally do. Well, what did I do? I went straight back to the vending machine. I remember popping in some $1 coins into this thing and I bought literally every single Red Bull and I stashed them all in my locker. Because even though they made me crash, even though they drained me more than they gave me energy, it gave me a glimpse of that normal state, of that state that I felt that I was entitled to, of what I'd remembered from my earlier childhood. And so Red Bull became a lifeline for me. Okay, so the idea here is that modern conditions hold us down in a place where it's a lot more tempting to reach outside of us for these temptations, these modern promises of instant satisfaction that actually drain us more than they fill us up. And these are what I call the big 6, right? Alcohol, weed, vaping, gaming, social media, and of course, porn. And there's a lot more than 6, right? Basically, these modern temptations offer to fill our buckets instantly, but they drain us more in the long term. And they keep us in that cycle of reaching outside of ourselves for more. Okay, so am I saying that all pleasure is bad? No, you can pursue pleasure. The point here is that pursuing pleasure directly is a fool's errand, because it leads to more pain than pleasure. It's like borrowing money on a credit card. It's always going to cost you more than you get up front. And this was well understood back in the day. The Stoics said, don't pursue pleasure directly, rather experience it indirectly as a byproduct of doing useful works. And the Bible presents the idea of sacrifice, right? You get to sacrifice before you can get what you want. And in Taoism, there's this concept of the yin and the yang, and the idea that if you cling to either side of this pain and pleasure dichotomy, you're going to get its opposite. And we can actually use that nug if we want to balance the scales in our favor, and we'll talk about that in a second. And modern science agrees with this. Pain is inseparable from pleasure. As you well know, whatever goes up must come down. What you might not know is that whatever goes up must go down further than your baseline. And that's the hangover that you experience after jerking off the porn or doing any of the other big 6, right? You don't feel great after doing those things. Furthermore, the higher it goes, right? So the more the porn you're watching, the lower the dip on the other side. And this point is super key. The more often you hit that stimulus, right? Whether it's porn or any other kind of upfront pleasure, well, the less good it's going to feel, the lower the lows are going to be on the other side, and the lower your baseline default state is going to be. So the more often you do you know what, the crappier your everyday state is going to be, the less happiness and motivation you're going to feel during the day, and the more tempted you're going to be to reach for more. Okay, so remember this, upfront pleasure is a trick. Good is what feels good after. And if you want to experience more pleasure than pain, well, what you can do is, number 1, get rid of upfront pleasure, right? Get rid of the big 6 as much as you can. Number 2 is pursue effortful things. Things like cold showers or exercise or tackling difficult projects. And when you do hard things, it's like a reverse drug. It might feel a little uncomfortable at first, but you're going to get more pleasure after the fact than pain you experience in the moment. So after you fix your bucket through evolutionary mismatch, this is actually how you refill your bucket naturally. Now the balance is positive and you can stop reaching outside of yourself to fill your bucket unnaturally in a way that's going to deplete you more in the long run. And the crazy thing is, once you start patching your bucket, effort starts to feel good because you're no longer in that lowered state where it really sucks to do anything, right? I mean, you can imagine if you have an energy drink, all of a sudden you feel like doing stuff, well, that can be more like your normal state. And on top of that, you can actually retrain your brain to love effort. How do you do that? Well, when the going gets tough, for example, on NoFap, if you think you're going to relapse, you're just having a really hard time with it, in that moment of difficulty, tell yourself that you're actually loving the challenge. And it might seem like you're kind of lying to yourself because it might not feel enjoyable, but actually it's not, because there's some things in that moment that are very positive that you can focus on. For example, reflect on the fact that the effort you're going through now, the struggle that you're going through now is going to produce a greater amount of pleasure afterwards, right? Because pain is inseparable from pleasure. Also, this is a glorious moment. Reflect on this, right? You are in the arena. You're doing one of the most important things you can do. You are overcoming an obstacle that's allowing you to achieve your full potential. Finally, reflect on the fact that 99% of guys are not going to do what you're doing right now. That is exceptional by definition. And when your subconscious brain picks up on this fact, other people are going to perceive you differently as well. This is going to retrain your brain to love effort, not just the effort of doing NoFap, but effort of any kind. Okay, so another tip, when the going gets hard on NoFap, you want to shift your energy. Now, this might sound kind of out there, but it works. Because when you're about to relapse or when you're having a hard time with it, you're coming from an energetic state of craving and compulsion and neediness for that external stimulus, right? And so in that moment, you can step your energetic level up to one of aggression and domination, and even anger, and not at yourself, right? But rather at this impulse within you. And society tells us, especially if we're men, these are not positive characteristics, but that's totally wrong. These states are tools that we can use. So when you're feeling that compulsion, when you're feeling that neediness, you can actually imagine that as like this little weak creature within you, and you can step it up and you can dominate that thing. You say, no, this is not happening, and it's gonna go away. It's really not that strong if you can level up your energy and just don't fight it at that level of craving and compulsion. Don't just try to resist it from that lower state. Step up your energy from a place where you can easily stomp on it. Another approach here is the so-called letting go technique, whereby you just fully accept the feeling of compulsion and neediness, and then it kind of sublimates over time. That's fine too, but I would say unless you're practicing meditation or you're already familiar with that technique, it's going to be a lot easier to step your energy up to one of aggression and domination. Again, not against yourself, but against this lower level impulse, which is trying to, consume you basically. Also, speaking of energy, you want to fix your energetic orientation here. You want to have a mission. You want to be focused. You want to be directed. Because when you're moving towards something, it's going to be a lot easier to ignore distractions. Remember earlier we talked about the yin and the yang? Well, the yang is the masculine polarity. It's directedness, it's advancing, it's focus. And the yin is the feminine polarity of ease, of being, of natural unfolding. And you would orient yourself with the masculine polarity, with the yang. Because when you're just kind of sitting there, you're unfocused, you're just kind of wallowing in self-pleasure, and it's really not going to help you. So it doesn't really matter what you pursue as long as it's meaningful to you, obviously, as long as there's a strong why behind it so it's motivating for you. And the big secret is once you start orienting yourself more with that yang polarity, you're going to be a lot more attractive to the feminine, to money, to the other good things you want in your life. Because you're no longer just sitting there in an unfocused way, you're actually advancing towards something. And other people will definitely pick up on that shift. Okay, so once you get a good streak going on NoFap, you're gonna have a ton more energy, right? That's one of the main benefits of NoFap. But also, it's a lot harder to control. It's kind of like driving a performance car that's really fast and nimble. Well, it's a lot easier to crash as well. So you wanna develop your ability to contain that extra energy. You wanna develop your consciousness, your awareness, in order to hold on to your newfound powers. Otherwise, you're going to spin out. You're going to be back at day one pretty soon, because you're inevitably going to encounter triggers which are going to tempt you to relapse, right? You have all this energy that wants to escape, and these triggers are going to come along, which are going to be almost impossible to avoid, right? Because you have very strong habits formed around that, most likely. And that's actually the reason that most people can't change, right? Something will happen, and then they'll automatically react to it in the way that they always have, and there's no gap there. There's no consciousness behind that decision. It just happens automatically. So that's what we have to do. We have to build a gap in between there. So whenever something happens to us, we can actually reflect on whether we want to act on it in the same way that we have in the past. And the way we do this is through meditation. So if you meditate for 20 minutes a day, it's going to make you more resistant to, reacting to these triggers. It's going to make you less impulsive overall, and it's going to allow you to delay gratification more, which is basically the key to achieving anything difficult in life. And homie, this is freaking huge, okay? I know it might sound like some generic information like, oh, meditate, to make NoFap easier, but no, this is huge, and it's gonna change your life much more than with NoFap, because as you get started with meditation, you're gonna notice that 99% of what you do is not really due to your intent or your agency or whatever. No, it's just a preconditioned pattern that you're acting out. So the more you meditate, you could actually notice that, well, I can actually change every aspect of my life if I want to. And meditation is kind of like going to the gym. You'll notice that in the first few weeks, it's kind of hard, but also you'll see a lot of gains within the first few weeks. And then you'll kind of plateau for a bit. But as you go deeper, you'll find that meditation can deeply improve your quality of life and even change your subjective experience of life. And that's actually the reason I created this channel. Next point, you can try prayer, okay? You don't have to be religious. You don't have to pray to anyone specifically, but it's helpful even if there's no, higher power that's gonna make it easier for you. So what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a higher energy state because you're pausing, you're taking a moment presence, you're stating your intent directly in a humble manner. And this is important for several reasons. Number one, most people, when they have a goal, for example, of doing NoFap, they don't really have that goal, right? They might have watched a video on it, they might have heard this concept, and in the back of their mind, they're like, oh, yeah, that could be kind of cool, and they just kind of click on to the next video. Well, that's not a goal, that's not an intent. But when you state it out loud on a regular basis from a place of humility, that can be really powerful. So if you do the things in this video, you're gonna level up to a place where NoFap becomes almost automatic. And what you don't wanna do is fight a war of attrition with your base level desires, right? You don't wanna fight the problem at the level at which it was created. Because whenever you resist, persists. So it's a lot easier, even though there might be a little struggle at first, to level up to a new paradigm where you can simply squash those lower level impulses, or they don't even arise. And you can totally do this. Once you start fixing your bucket, your energy level is going to start going up and it's going to get easier and easier to do it. Make small incremental improvements with this. You can totally do it. Once you fix your bucket, you're actually achieving your birthright state, which most people have never really experienced. So watch this video again, pick some ideas you're actually going to implement, do it one step at a time, and you're going to start filling your bucket naturally. And I'm going to be making a lot more videos like this on how to increase your energy, on how to increase your consciousness. So subscribe if you liked it and click like on the video, and I'll see you in the next one.